Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And we are about to get the 2028 season underway. We have not had great success with the A's thus far. We have been very consistently a below average team. We haven't actually been horrible, but you can see we've been between 72 and 80 wins in each of our 4 seasons with Oakland. We've had the lowest budget in baseball every season. I believe last year we moved up to 29th in player payroll, but still certainly don't have great resources with this team. The hope, though, is that we've been building up our farm system through the draft and through international amateur free agency, and that at some point over the next few seasons, hopefully the next 2 to 3 seasons, if we can keep our job, we'll start getting some dividends paid from our farm system, and hopefully we can at least get ourselves on a treadmill where we're developing some good players. We've got them on the majors for 4, 5, 6 years before they get too expensive for us. Maybe we trade away some of them for some big talent and we lock up a couple of them and start trying to build around them. As I think about this team heading into this upcoming season, kind of a different situation for the A's. Our pitching has been our strength through the first 4 years of this playthrough. Strengths obviously being relative since we haven't had a winning record overall yet. In this year, I feel like our pitching is probably down from where it was a year ago, and our batting should be better than it was a year ago. What that adds up to on the field, I don't know. Take a quick look at the preseason predictions, which I haven't looked at yet, and we're projected to go 77 and 85, which, given that one of our owner goals is just not to suck this year, that would be a pretty good result. Does project that we're going to have a 4.02 ERA, which looks like it would be the best in all of the American League. As I was just talking about, I think our pitching is going to be down this year, but I hope I'm wrong about that. And speaking of things that I hope I'm wrong about, certainly a big storyline for these A's this year is what is going to happen with Hidero Endo. He's a guy that some commenters really are intrigued by. Some commenters really hate. I admittedly am probably more in the hate camp, mainly because I've just never played with a player like Endo before. 40 contact, I've had 40 contact guys on occasion when I've had really bad teams or players with excellent defense that is at an important position up the middle. Have dealt with 40 contact before, and it generally has not worked out well at all. I don't think I have ever played with a player with a 30 for avoid strikeouts. And as I've been talking about with many of you in the message board for this YouTube channel, although that's not really what it's called, it's just the comment section, I think it's conceivable that Endo bats under 200. And I think if the guy goes out and bats over 600 at-bats this year, which would obviously be 150, 160 game kind of season most likely, he could be approaching 300 strikeouts. And even though he's got that incredible power, and even though he'll draw some walks, and even though he is a solid defensive infielder, I question how much value he's ultimately going to have. I do think he can certainly be a positive WAR player, but just not the type of player that I have ever tried to play with that I can think of. So it's going to be a learning experience for me. And as I've said in my responses to some of the comments on him, I hope I'm proven wrong, and I hope he's a great success because he lingered on the free agent market so long that we got him for a 1 year deal at $3 million. So that puts us in a situation where we've basically got minimum years around that 3 million level and then some arbitration years ahead of us. So we've got control of him, but we haven't made a long-term commitment to him. So I hope I'm wrong, and I hope he's incredibly productive. And I hope that there's lots of you out there telling me I told you so over the next several episodes when he is a very productive major league player for these Oakland A's. Couple of minor housekeeping items before we get the episode going in earnest and really moving forward with this new team and this new season. We did recently make that trade for Jacob Misiorowski, and I mentioned we were going to stash him in AAA, but I don't think there's a point in us doing that. So we ended up sending down the left-handed reliever Bennett Souza, who we had signed to a minor league contract. I don't love that that only leaves our bullpen with two lefties at this point, especially because tend to want to encourage right-hand hitters when we're at home in the Oakland Coliseum by potentially having lefty pitchers on the mound. So we've definitely taken a little bit of flexibility away from our manager by only giving him two lefties out of the pen and none in the rotation. But I just think Misiorowski with his stuff is a pitcher that I'm very interested in seeing how he does for us. We also have perused the waiver wire here on opening day. We have put in a claim for another pitcher to hopefully help improve the edges of our pitching staff, but we'll focus on talking about them in a few days if that claim of ours actually does go through. And last but certainly not least, OOTP developer Will Bay commented on our last episode, and appreciate him taking the time to watch and comment. And he brought up a point on Hidero Endo that is something that some of you have been asking me to spend a little more time on that I just haven't gotten around to because I haven't spent tons of time on it. And that was the suggestion, given my concerns about his contact and particularly his avoid K ratings, to potentially get into the developmental training plan for Hidero Endo and to make some adjustments to potentially try to make him a more well-rounded player. So I am going to go ahead and do that. I think that was a great suggestion by Will. I still don't love Endo, let's be clear about that. And I tend to not love using these sliders all that aggressively because my understanding is, as you can see here, it's a zero-sum game. If you start getting off of neutral and adding something, you have to take away from something else. And my understanding is also that if you are, say, for example, 10 ticks above average, the potential positive impact of that is a bit less than if you are, say, the exact same 10 ticks below average on something. So I think to mix metaphors and speak in finance terms, I think the net present value of what you're going to achieve by adjusting these sliders ends up moving more and more negative the more you kind of get away from the center, given my understanding of how these work. While we're talking about the developers, and Will, in case you're still listening, I don't think there's been a new manual out yet, although I admittedly have not checked in the last week or so. But there are some of us who are still old school who would love to read a online manual and learn more about this game. And the other thing I'll just throw out there that I know is a sometime frustration of mine and sometime frustration of others is that I do feel like the system as far as fan interest is a little primitive at times and a little bit punitive in terms of when you've signed a player who's clearly a rental, they leave the next off season and you take a big hit to fan interest. So anything that the devs can do on that front in the coming years is much appreciated. Do want to give the developers a shout out, although it is too late for us in this simulation with what we just experienced this past off season, where Clark Schmidt, who was the AL Pitcher of the Month in both August and September of last year, seems to have hit that 31 to 32 year massive drop off in pitching velocity this offseason. You can see he's dropped 4 miles an hour since last summer. His stuff is now below average, and we've actually dropped him out of our bullpen. But the new patch is out there, and I believe it should address some of this premature velocity dropping that we've seen from players in OOTP 25. So thank the development team for getting that out there for us. And fortunately, it's not going to help us with Schmidt. The only benefit is that we are getting to the later years of the contract we signed him to after we made that trade with the Yankees to bring him on board at the start of this series. And we're heading into those more expensive team option years. And we will likely be moving on from Mr. Schmidt after this season is complete. Since he's now in a relief role, we did get the 5-point boost to his stuff back to 50, but we'll see how he does. We've also got a starter with 45 stuff in Mitch Spence, who's at the back end of our rotation, really just trying to benefit from the captain personality there. But think that hopefully that correction in the latest patch will make the game play a little bit better, because it did seem like there were a lot of 31 and 32-year-olds that were declining a bit more rapidly in OOTP 25 world than they had been in real life. So if you haven't downloaded the latest patch to your game yet, make sure you do it. But now back to Mr. Endo and the good suggestion from Will. As you see, we've adjusted a few things here. Didn't really want to mess with his 3 strengths, his exceptional power, his above-average eye, and his above-average defense. But in the effort to perhaps help him with his contact and avoiding strikeouts, we've invested a lot of points into there at a small expense to his BABIP and a pretty significant potential expense to both his gap power and his running speed. The thought is he's a 30 running speed to begin with, so he's probably not going to be legging out a lot of extra base hits. So I don't care as much about the gap power, and feel like maybe his running speed drops to a 25 if we get some negative virtual dice rolls. But do I really care about the difference between a 25 and a 50 running speed? Endo's game is, and there have been some great analogies other than Joey Gallo that some of you have brought up in comments to recent episodes. I was just going to make the comparison to Dave Kingman from 40-ish years ago, where it seemed like was going to be a single, a home run, a strikeout, or a walk in a lot of situations. Rob Deere is one that was brought up instantly recently, another very interesting blast from the past in terms of the profile for Mr. Endo. And I'm sure there are lots of other players who have struggled to hit the ball, struck out at insane rates, but did make the ball travel an incredible distance on those occasions when they did make contact. That would also be good analogies for Hidero Endo. But it's time to get this season underway and see if potentially my reticence to bring him on board and my concerns about how he is really going to perform at the major league level are warranted. or not. And our Oakland A's are off to a 1-1 start in our first two games, but more importantly, the waiver claim that we had mentioned went through. Emmett Sheehan, released by the Los Angeles Dodgers, has a pretty good profile for a reliever, and honestly, he's got a profile where we may end up using him as a starter. He's actually started primarily in AAA over the last couple of years, but the Dodgers have primarily used him out of the bullpen when he's gotten a small amount of action at the major league level. Been a pretty average-ish pitcher, ERA plus a bit above average, FIP minus a bit below average over the course of the 4 seasons he's spent in the majors with the Dodgers organization. But the Dodgers trash could be our treasure, because conceivably he could certainly potentially help us in the rotation. We're not going to put him right in there immediately, but his skill set is probably superior to a lot of guys who are currently in our rotation, so he becomes a fallback option for us. We had to trade away Domingo Germán to make space for him. Didn't want to get rid of another left-handed reliever, and thought Germán was the most logical guy for us to move on from. So traded away Domingo Germán. Was not a particularly exciting deal. We also included 30-year-old, we got the 30-year-old minor leaguer Ryan Kreidler, who's on a major league contract, but he'll be going down to AAA for us. And also had to include minor league pitcher Camilo Hernandez, who is not a big-time prospect. We got them to keep most of Kreidler's minimum salary for this upcoming year, so that will free up a little more money for us to invest in the team going forward as well. And I didn't mention this, but I do like Sheehan's profile so much that we're going to put him into the stopper role. It's a role that I've used heavily in the past, most recently in our expansion series with the Buffalo Wings in OOTP 24. Haven't necessarily felt that we've had anyone who's been a high quality enough pitcher to put in that role, but would certainly like to maximize the number of innings that I get out of Sheehan if we don't end up moving him into the rotation. And although we're probably not going to have the most opportunities where there's going to be close games in the late innings where the stopper would tend to be used, hopefully he'll pitch more than anyone else in our bullpen. And unfortunately, Sheehan's first outing with us did not go well. Going to be out for a week with biceps tendonitis after one pitch. So certainly not the type of start that we wanted. Now, he did get an out with that one pitch that he actually threw, and he got a hold in a game that we ended up losing in 10 innings. You may have noticed that Mason Miller is also banged up. Fortunately, it's just a mild calf strain, so he may have his next start pushed back a day, but not hopefully going to be a long and lingering issue. We are a bit concerned, though, that Brian Rincon is diagnosis pending, off to a monster start, 6 for 8 in the first 3 games. We put him through that strength and conditioning program this past off season, and he moved from fragile to normal in terms of his injury proneness. Just have to hope that this leg injury does not turn into anything too serious. I guess we'll also check on early returns from Mr. Endo, since that's a lot of what I've talked about. He's hitting 200, so he's doing better than I expected on that front. But he has struck out 5 times in 10 at-bats, so he's striking out 50% of the time, added up to a 40 WRC plus and a minus 0.1 WAR in a completely irrelevant and tiny small sample size of just 3 games. And fortunately, just a mild calf strain for Brian Rincon, so he'll be out for a few days, but not the end of the world. And we've got some bad news, we've got some more bad news, and then we do have a small amount of good news. The first piece of bad news is we are off to a 1-9 start, so this season is going horribly in the early going for the Oakland A's. Another piece of bad news, Mitch Spence going to be out for a year with a torn rotator cuff. You may recall that we have very recently traded away Domingo Germán. We also released Kenyon Middleton not that long ago. So kind of have a need for a pitcher right now. We also only have one other captain personality on our team, and it is the part-time player who is only playing against left-handed pitching as far as a starter in terms of the veteran Christian Walker, who we traded for this past off season. So not necessarily going to have the strength in our clubhouse that we may have had with Mr. Spence around. Although, given that we're off to a 1-9 start, I'm not sure that losing him is going to really be all that significant. Emmett Sheehan has not been good. 27 ERA, but it's really only over 2 1/3 innings. 0-2 record, though, so in the 2 games he's pitched since he got that hold in his one-pitch outing in his first action in Oakland, he's been pretty brutal, losing 2 games as the stopper. And although he's kind of been rough in the small sample size, we are going to give Sheehan a spot in the rotation. That'll allow us to bring Bennett Sousa back after he was briefly demoted to AAA for us. I did mention that there was some good news, and in the interest of fair and balanced reporting, despite our 1-9 record and our brutal start, including 8 consecutive losses, Hidero Endo has hit home runs in 4 consecutive games for us. Batting average is .306. Still has struck out 13 times in 36 at-bats, but honestly, if he strikes out at that rate, I would certainly take that given the 30 avoid strikeout rating. He was in the 40s with his WRC plus a week ago. Now he's at 183, and he's already half a win above replacement. I think it would have been an overreaction to say he was a failure based on that small sample size a week ago. Certainly a slightly larger sample size at this point, but not going to declare victory for all of the Endo lovers quite yet. It's a long season, but he's been productive thus far. And our long national nightmare finally ended after 10 consecutive losses when we took the final game of a 3-game series in Cleveland. Since then, we dropped a series at home against the Astros, so still a brutal 3-13 start for the Oakland A's. Hopefully things will be getting a little better going forward. The draft pool was just released. We've obviously got a lot of research to do over the next few months till the draft in July. You may remember that we will be picking 2nd overall in the draft this year after we got a bit lucky in the lottery after having the 4th worst record in baseball. For those of you who have been encouraging us to pick a college player, looks like there may be a few near the top of the list. Ben Giddens, a 21-year-old second baseman, certainly looks like an excellent contact hitter with a little pop in his bat, some good speed, not necessarily a very good defensive player. If I had to play him in the infield, I'd probably play him at third base. Could also play him in left field. Don't necessarily love him as far as his defensive ability, but the speed, the personality, and the potential ability to get on base by hitting the ball are all pretty interesting. 21-year-old first baseman Tim Woodworth out of Stanford, player with potentially really good power, pretty well balanced other than that. Brutal infielder, not a lot of speed, some positive personality traits. And then the third top 10 prospect, who's a college player, is Jeremy Martin, 22-year-old pitcher out of Indiana University. Looks like he could certainly be a pretty solid starting pitcher with that profile. Extreme ground ball tendencies, throws in the mid to high 90s, low leadership, solid stamina, not great at holding on runners, but does look like a guy with a potential 4-pitch arsenal who could be solid at everything if things work out. So not a horrible prospect there. I don't know why someone whose name is Jeremy is nicknamed Steel Arm Johnny, but it is what it is. So 3 college players to consider among the top 10 prospects, but we'll be doing a lot of scouting over the next few months, as I noted, to determine who we think the right pick is at number 2 overall. But looks like there will be some college players at that pick for us to at least consider. And we could certainly use a boost from our farm system, and a guy who's in his early 20s who could be helping us in a year or two is certainly a path for us to consider in the draft this year. And a piece of good news, Darell Hernandez finally recovered from that injury that cost him the end of last season and all of spring training. So we're going to put him on a rehab assignment. Not sure exactly where he'll fit in our infield. Certainly think he'll be on the major league roster, so we may have some interesting decisions to make after he's shaken off some of the rust. But given that he missed all of spring training and he has been out at this point since July of last year, conceivably might give him a week or two down in the minors before we have to force ourselves to make that decision. And Hernandez has now played for a week in AAA, hitting .281 in 7 at-bats, so he probably is ready to come back. And as it turns out, Brian Rincon going to be out for about a week with forearm stiffness, so we're going to punt on the more significant decision about what this roster is ultimately going to look like. Put Rincon onto the 10-day IL. That'll allow us to bring Hernandez up right now. Still going to have to make a decision in about a week and a half when Rincon is ready to go, but who knows? We might have more injuries by then. We're sitting here at 7-19. We're already 13 games behind on April 26th. The Astros are playing some of the best baseball in all of baseball. They actually have the best record in all of baseball. 6 straight wins, 9-1 in their last 10. We've at least been borderline respectable in our last 10, but still certainly digging out from that 1-11 start that we had. And we made it to the first day in May at 9-20. Our Oakland A's are the worst team in baseball at 12 games behind in the division. We are tied with the Yankees for being as far behind the leader in our division as anyone in all of baseball. Endo has been productive. 1 month, 93 at-bats, but 8 homers, 16 ribbies. He has struck out 41 times in 93 at-bats, so that has certainly been a concern as expected. But if he hits 237, I would take that in a second. I still think he's going to struggle to hit 200, but thus far I've been proven wrong. But it is early going. But a 136 WRC plus through the first month of the season means that I can't blame Blank's Endo for the very poor showing of the Oakland A's over the first month of this season. Taking a look at team statistics, and we are 11th in the league in runs scored, 14th in the league in runs allowed, so kind of as I expected. Our batting is actually a bit better than it's been in terms of our offense. But our pitching is one of the worst staffs in the American League. Second worst starter ERA of 4.85. So that simulation that we ran at the start of this episode that indicated we might lead the American League with an ERA in the low fours appears to be a bit off thus far. Have gotten a little bit unlucky. We're 2 games below Pythagorean expectations. 0-6 in one-run games, 1-5 against left-handed pitchers, but not much better at 8-15 against right-handed pitchers. So it has been a pretty brutal start to the season for the Oakland A's. Nowhere to go but up, I hope. Taking a quick look at the pitching staff, Miller has been fine. Bubba Chandler's been mediocre. Kyle Bradish off to a nice start with us. Luis Garcia with an ERA of over 7. And Emmett Sheehan still boasting a double-digit ERA, although I guess it is technically improved by about 50% since we moved him into the rotation from the bullpen. Still not good, though. He was 0-2, so he's 1-2 as a starter. The bullpen, also some issues. Bennett Souza, Jacob Misiorowski, and Ben Leeper, all with earned run averages of over 6. So a lot of low-hanging fruit to hopefully potentially improve this starting rotation. But hasn't been a great start to the season by any measure. I do hope that things get better, and I think they probably will. At this point, we are just 6 days away from getting Rincon back and having to make some interesting decisions about our infield. So I can't say it's been a good start, but it's been an interesting start. Endo, as we've talked about, is doing better than I thought he would. Again, if Hidero Endo is going to hit 237 rather than the kind of 187 type of average I thought he might be hitting for, given the poor contact, the high avoid strikeouts, and the lack of speed. But if he's able to hit in the 230s, he's going to be a pretty valuable player. I still think he may struggle to hit over 200, but as I noted, I'm glad I've been proven wrong so far. But we've still got 5 months to go in this season, so lots of time for other things to happen. He's gotten, at this point, a month into the season, reasonably proficient at playing third base at this point. Take a look at his fielding stats. Zone rating and defensive efficiency, both below average. 927 fielding percentages. He made 4 errors already. Hopefully some of that was just him learning the position a bit. I believe he was a 40 or 45 out of 60 when the season began. So he's made some strides over this first month in terms of learning how to play third base, and hopefully his defensive statistics will also improve going forward. And with that, we will call it an episode, just taking a quick look at some of the statistics from our position players. We do that. Certainly Mr. Candelario, who we signed as a minor league free agent, batting just a $184. His roster spot could certainly be one of the roster spots that is in jeopardy when Rincon comes back. Candelario at 34 years old. Certainly not a big part of our future, and if he's hitting below the Mendoza line, which I am still tempted to potentially rename the Hidero Endo line, if Candelario's hitting below that line in a few days when Mr. Rincon is potentially able to come off of the IL, his roster spot could certainly be in jeopardy. But we will be focusing on those decisions in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you've had a great day.